So this morning, after recent threats by the Trump administration, and I'll get to that in just a minute, I figured that I would go ahead and look up. This is an AI overview, so we'll look at, according to recent reports, several European countries, including Germany, Austria, Denmark, and the United Kingdom, are considering or have already started to suspend asylum applications and potentially deport Syrian refugees following the fall of Bashar al-Assad, citing a potential shift in the safety situation in Syria. All right. Now, let's look at what Keir Starmer said, the Prime Minister of the UK. Now, remember, he is the head of the Liberal Party, the socialist side, the left wing of the UK. And listen to what he said. British Prime Minister admits mass migration to UK happened by design. So what he's going to do, he's going to do something, but he's going to provide an excuse first to make himself look like the good guy. British Prime Minister Starmer accused his predecessors of intentionally designing a one-nation experiment in open borders after the latest statistics reveal that more than 900,000 migrants entered the UK last year alone. That's wild. The Labour Party leader laid the blame on the Conservative Party for the record high numbers, claiming the opposition failed Brexit voters on how to curtail illegal immigration. So, this pushback on illegal immigration, contrary to what the liberal politicians in the United States are claiming, it is a universal problem for Western countries. Brexit, which authorized UK's exit from the European Union, narrowly passed in June 2016 and formally took effect in January 2020. Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Time and again, they failed, and now the chorus of excuses has begun, Starmer said Thursday on Downing Street, referring to Tory leaders Kemi Badenoch. Admission that her party has failed Great Britain on immigration. A failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. It isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure, the Prime Minister continued. This happened by design, not by accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalize immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment and open borders. So this Prime Minister here, he is providing an excuse for whatever it is that he plans to do next. Now we go to this particular article on ABC News. Trump confirms plan to declare national emergency to use military for mass deportations. President-elect Donald Trump on Monday confirmed that he would declare a national emergency to carry out his campaign promise of mass deportations of migrants living in the U.S. without legal permission. Overnight, Trump responded to a social media post from Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, who said earlier this month that there are reports the incoming administration is preparing such a declaration and to use military assets to deport migrants. True, Trump wrote. Trump pledged to get started on mass deportation as soon as he enters office. Now, I have pointed out to you, at least over the past 5 years, maybe even 8 or 10 years, that this mass immigration comes from an ideology called what did they used to call it? I can't even remember anymore. Diversity. The diversity doctrine. Now, but this was predicted in the kingdom of iron in the book of Daniel, chapter 2. We'll start in verse 31. He's speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the crown of gold on the image that he saw in his vision. You, O king, saw and beheld a great image. This image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form thereof was fearful. This image's head was of fine gold, and his breasts and arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, and his legs of iron, but his feet were part of iron and part of clay. Diversity. You saw till that stone was cut without hands, which smote the image, not on its head, not on its arms, not on its legs, not on its calves, but on its feet, that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the brass, and the silver, and the gold broke to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, that would be Mount Zion. For those of you who are not aware, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now, telling the interpretation therefore before the king, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the ale of Shemayim has given you kingdom, power, strength, and glory, and wheresoever the children of men dwells, the beasts of the field and the fowls of heaven, he has given into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You, Nebuchadnezzar, are this head of gold. After you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you. What kingdom was that? The one of silver, the Persian Empire. What kingdom was after that? It was Alexander the Great and his Grecian Empire, but he died shortly after his conquest, and the inheritance went to 4 kings of Greece. And a third of brass, which shall bear ruler over all the earth. And the 4th kingdom, what came after Greece? It was Rome. Shall be strong as iron. Iron breaks into pieces and shatters as iron shatters everything. All. Iron shatters all. It shall shatter into pieces and crush. You saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. The kingdom will become divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as you saw the iron of iron mixed with clay, potsherd, and the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay. So the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, it shall come to pass that the seed of men, it shall come to pass that they will not cleave to one another, because iron does not mix with clay. It didn't work. The experiment did not work. What happens when these people find out this experiment did not work? And why? Why did this experiment happen in the first place? I will show you why. I will show you why. They had to try to find a way to hide their sin of superiority. The sin of superiority came to a climax in World War II. That's right. This sin started right here in the United States of America. The Horrifying American Roots of Nazi Eugenics by Edwin Black. You should read this whole article. I'll probably read most of it. You should have the book. It is highly advisable that you have the book. Hitler and his henchmen victimized an entire continent and exterminated millions in his quest for a so-called master race. But the concept of a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed master Nordic race didn't originate with Hitler. No. The idea was created in the United States and cultivated in California. Decades before Hitler came to power, California eugenists played an important, although little-known role in American eugenics movement campaign for ethnic cleansing. Eugenics was racist pseudoscience determined to wipe away all human beings deemed unfit, preserving only those who conform to a Nordic stereotype. Elements of this philosophy were enshrined as national policy by forced sterilization and segregation laws, as well as marriage restrictions enacted in 27 states. In 1909, now you know what the timeline was, California became the third state to adopt such laws. Ultimately, eugenics practitioners coercively sterilized some 60,000 Americans, barred the marriage of thousands, and forcibly segregated thousands into colonies, and persecuted untold numbers in ways we are just learning. Before World War II, nearly half of coercive sterilizations were done in California. Even after the war, the state accounted for a third of all such surgeries. California was considered to be, yes, progressive California, was considered to be the epicenter of the American eugenics movement. During the 20th century first decades, California's eugenicists included potent but little-known race scientists such as Army venereal disease specialist Dr. Paul Popenoe, citrus magnate and Polytechnic benefactor Paul Gosney, Sacramento banker Charles M. Goethe, or Gaethje, as well as members of the California State Board of Charities and Corrections and the University of California Board of Regents, all the high progressive peoples. Eugenics would have been so much parlor talk had it not been for the extensive financing by corporate philanthropies, specifically the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Harriman Railroad fortune. They were all in league with some of the most respected scientists hailing from such prestigious universities such as Stanford, Yale, Harvard, and Princeton. And I never can understand why any Jew, any African, any of the non-Nordic types would ever darken the door of these hideous places. But I digress. These academicians espouse race theories and race science and faked and twisted data to serve eugenicist racist claims. Stanford president David Starr Jordan originated the notion of race and blood in his 1902 racial epistle Blood of a Nation, in which the university scholar declared that human qualities, conditions such as talent and poverty, were passed through the blood. In 1904, the Carnegie Institute established a laboratory complex at Cold Springs Harbor and Long Island that stockpiled millions of index cards on ordinary Americans, as researchers carefully plotted the removal of family bloodlines and whole peoples. From Cold Spring Harbor, eugenics advocates agitated in the legislatures of America as well as the National Social Services Agency and associations. The Harriman Railroad fortune paid local charities such as the New York Bureau of Industries and Immigration to seek out what's first on the list? What's first on the list? Jewish. Italian and other immigrants in New York and other crowded cities and subject them to deportation, trumped-up confinement, or forced sterilization. Yeah, and I'll have something to say by the end of this video that might shock some people. The Rockefeller, crowded, subject to trumped-up confinement or forced sterilization. The Rockefeller Foundation helped found the German Eugenics program and even funded the program that Joseph Mengele worked in and before he went to Auschwitz. Much of the spiritual guidance and political agitation for the American eugenics movement came from California's quasi-autonomous eugenics societies such as Pasadena-based Human Betterment Foundation and the California branch of the American Eugenics Society, which coordinated much of their activity with the Eugenics Research Society in Long Island. These organizations, which function as part of closely knit network, published racist, eugenist newsletters and pseudoscience journals such as Eugenical News, Eugenics, and propagandize for the Nazis. That's right, folks. It started right here in the good old USA. Eugenics was born as a scientific curiosity in the Victorian age. In 1863, Sir Francis Galton, the cousin of Charles Darwin, theorized that if talented people only married other talented people, the result would be measurably better offspring. At the turn of the last century, Galton's ideas were imported into the United States just as Gregor Mendel's principles of heredity were discovered. American eugenics advocates believe with the religious fervor that the same Mendelian concepts determining the color and size of peas and corn and cattle also govern the social and intellectual character of men. In America, demographically reeling from immigration upheaval and torn by post-Reconstruction chaos, race conflict was everywhere in the early 20th century. Elitists, utopians, and so-called progressives, that's right, progressives, used their smoldering race fears and class bias with their desire to make a better world. They reinvented Galton's eugenics into a repressive and racist ideology. The intent, populate the world with vastly more of their own socio-economic and biological kind and less or none of everybody else. The superior species that the eugenics movement sought was populated not merely by tall, strong, talented people. That wasn't good enough. Eugenicists craved blonde, blue-eyed Nordic types. This group alone, they believed, was fit to inherit the earth. In the process, the movement intended to subtract emancipated Negroes, immigrant Asian laborers, Indians, Hispanics, East European Jews, dark-haired hill folk, poor people, the infirmed, and really anyone classified outside of the gentrified genetic lines drawn up by American raceologists. How? By identifying so-called defective family trees and subjecting them to a lifelong segregation and sterilization programs to kill their bloodlines. The grand plan was to literally wipe away the reproductive capability of those deemed weak and inferior, the so-called unfit. The eugenists hoped to neutralize the viability of 10% of the population at a sweep until none was left except themselves. 18 solutions were explored in a Carnegie-supported 1911 preliminary report of the Committee of Eugenics section of the American Breeders Association to study and to report on the best practical means for cutting off the defective germplasm in the human population. Point 8 was what Europe and Canada are doing more and more of right now: euthanasia. The most commonly supported method of eugenicide in America was a lethal chamber or publicly located operated gas chambers. So these ideas were developed in the United States of America and of course eventually exported to Germany. In 1918, Popenoe, the Army venereal disease specialist during World War I, co-wrote the widely used textbook Applied Eugenics, which argued from a historical point of view the first method by which presents itself is execution. Its value in keeping up the standard of the race should not be underestimated. Applied Eugenics also devoted a chapter to lethal selection, which operated through the destruction of the individual by some adverse feature of the environment, such as excessive cold, bacteria, or maybe a jab, or other bodily deficiency. Eugenics breeders believed American society was not yet ready to implement an organized lethal solution. But many mental institutions and doctors practice improvised medical lethality and passive euthanasia on their own. They were already doing it. One institution in Lincoln, Illinois, fed its incoming patients milk from tubercular cows, believing a eugenically strong individual would be immune. 30 to 40% annual death rates resulted in Lincoln. Some doctors practice passive eugenicide, one newborn infant at a time. Other doctors at mental institutions engage in lethal neglect. Nonetheless, with eugenicide marginalized, the main solution for eugenicists was rapid expansion of forced segregation, sterilization, as well as more marriage restrictions. California led the nation, performing nearly all sterilization procedures with little or no due process. In its first 25 years of eugenic legislation, California sterilized 9,782 individuals, mostly women. Many were classified as bad girls, diagnosed as passionate, oversexed, or sexually wayward. At Sonoma, some of the women were sterilized because of what was deemed to be an abnormally large clitoris or labia. In 1933 alone, at least 1,278 coercive sterilizations were performed, 700 of which were on women. The state's two leading sterilization mills in 1933 were Sonoma State Home with 388 operations and Patton State Hospital with 363 operations. Other sterilization centers include Agnews, Mendocino, Napa, Norwalk, Stockton, and Pacific Colony State Hospitals. Even the United States Supreme Court endorsed aspects of eugenics in its infamous 1927 decision. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "It is better for all the world if instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. 3 generations of imbeciles is enough." This decision opened the floodgates for thousands to be coercively sterilized or otherwise persecuted as subhuman. Years later, the Nazis at the Nuremberg trials quoted Holmes' words in their own defense. Only after eugenics became entrenched in the United States was the campaign transplanted into Germany. In no small measure through the efforts of California eugenicists, who published booklets idealizing sterilization and circulated them to German officials and scientists. Hitler studied American eugenics laws. He tried to legitimize his anti-Semitism by medicalizing it and wrapping it in the more palatable pseudo-scientific facade of eugenics. And we just witnessed in our own country a whole bunch of pseudoscience nonsense for the last 4 or 5 years. Hitler was able to recruit more followers among reasonable Germans by claiming that science was on his side. Trust the science, Hitler said. While Hitler's race hatred sprung up from his own mind, the intellectual outlines of the eugenics Hitler adopted in 1924 were made in the USA. During the 20s, Carnegie Institute's eugenics scientists cultivated deep personal and professional relationship with Germany's fascist eugenicists. In Mein Kampf, published in 1924, Hitler quoted American eugenics ideology and openly displayed a thorough knowledge of American eugenics. There is today one state, wrote Hitler, in which at least weaklings toward a better conception of immigration are noticeable. Of course, this is not our model German republic, but the United States. Hitler proudly told his comrades just how closely he followed the progress of American eugenics movement. I have studied with great interest, he told a fellow Nazi, the laws of several American states concerning prevention of reproduction by people whose progeny would in all probability be of no value or to be injurious to the racial stock. Hitler even wrote a fan letter to the American eugenics leader, Madison Grant, calling his race-based eugenics book, The Passing of the Great Race, his Bible. Hitler's struggle for a superior race would be a mad crusade for a master race. Now the American term Nordic was freely exchanged with Germanic or Aryan. And by the way, Aryans were Iranians, the upper castes, and Persians, the upper caste of the Hindu-Indian caste system. Weird and strange stuff these people were, delusional stuff here. Race science, racial purity, and racial dominance became the driving force behind Hitler's Nazism. Nazi eugenics would ultimately dictate who would be persecuted in a Reich-dominated Europe, how people will live, how they will die. Nazi doctors would become the unseen generals in Hitler's war against the Jews and other Europeans deemed inferior. Doctors would create the science, devise the eugenic formulas, and even hand-select the victims for sterilization, euthanasia, and mass extermination. During the Reich's early years, eugenicists across America welcomed Hitler's plans. As a logical fulfillment of their own decade of research and effort, California eugenicists republished Nazi propaganda for American consumption. They also arranged for Nazi scientific exhibits, such as August 1934 display at the LA County Museum for the annual meeting of the American Public Health Association. In 1934, as Germany's sterilizations were accelerated beyond 5,000 per month, the California eugenics leader, C.M. Gauthier, upon returning from Germany, ebulliently bragged to a key colleague, "You will be interested to know that your work has played a powerful part in shaping the opinion of the group of intellectuals who are behind Hitler in this epoch-making program. Everywhere I sense that your opinions have been tremendously stimulated by American thought. I want you, my dear friend, to carry this thought with you for the rest of your life, that you have really jolted into action a great government of 60 million people." That same year, 10 years after Virginia passed the Sterilization Act, Joseph D. Jarnett, superintendent of Virginia's Western State Hospital, observed in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, The Germans are beating us at our own game. More than providing the scientific roadmap, America funded Germany's eugenics institutions. By 1926, Rockefeller had donated some $410,000, almost $4 million in 21st century money, to hundreds of German researchers. In May 1926, Rockefeller awarded $250,000 to the German Psychiatric Institute for the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, later to become the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Psychiatry. Among the leading psychiatrists at the German Psychiatric Institute was Ernst Rudin, who became director and eventually an architect of Hitler's systematic medical repression. Another in Kaiser Wilhelm's Institute, eugenic complex of institutions, was the Institute for Brain Research. Since 1915, it had operated out of a single room. Everything changed when Rockefeller money arrived in 1929. A grant of $317,000 allowed the Institute to construct a major building and take center stage in German race biology. The Institute received additional grants from the Rockefeller Foundation during the next several years. Leading the Institute once again was Hitler's medical henchman Ernst Rudin. Rudin's organization became the prime director and recipient of the murderous experimentation and research conducted on Jews, Gypsies, and others. Beginning in 1940, thousands of Germans were taken from old age homes, mental institutions, and other custodial facilities, were systematically gassed. Between 50,000 and 100,000 were eventually killed. Leon Whitney, executive secretary of the American Eugenics Society, declared of Nazism, "While we were pussyfooting around, the Germans were calling a spade a spade." Special recipient of Rockefeller funding was Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics in Berlin. For decades, American eugenicists have craved twins to advance their research into heredity. The Institute was now preparing to undertake such research on an unprecedented level. On May 13, 1932, the Rockefeller Foundation in New York dispatched a radiogram to its Paris office. June meeting executive committee, $9,000 over 3 years period to KYG Institute Anthropology for research on twins and effects on later generation and substance toxic for germ plasm. At the time of Rockefeller's endowment, Ottmar Freiherr von Verschwer, a hero in American eugenics circles, functioned as the head of the Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics. Rockefeller funding of that research continued both directly and through other research conduits during Verschwer's early tenure. In 1935, Verschwer led the Institute to form a rival eugenics facility in Frankfurt that was much heralded in the American eugenics press. Where did that thing go? There it is. Research on twins in the Third Reich exploded, backed up by government decrees. Verschwer wrote in Der Erbats, a eugenics doctor journal he edited, that Germany's war would yield a total solution to the Jewish problem. Now, we'll continue. Verschwer had a long-time assistant. His name was Joseph Mengele. On May 30th, 1943, Mengele arrived at Auschwitz. Verschwer notified the German Research Society, "My assistant, Dr. Joseph Mengele, joined me in this branch of research. He is presently employed at the Hauptstafführer and camp physician in the captain camp physician in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Anthropological testing of the most racially diverse groups in this concentration camp is being carried out with the permission of SS Reichsführer, which was Himmler. Mengele began searching the boxcar arrivals for twins, which, when he found them, he performed beastly experiments, scrupulously wrote up the report, and sent the paperwork back to Verschwer's Institute for evaluation, often cadavers Eyes and other body parts were also dispatched to Berlin's eugenic institutes. Rockefeller executives never knew of Mengele, but with few exceptions, the foundation had ceased all eugenics studies in Nazi-occupied Europe before the war erupted in 1939, but at the time the die had been cast. The talented men Rockefeller and Carnegie financed, the institutions that they helped found, and the science they helped create took on a scientific momentum all on its own. After the war, eugenics was declared a crime against humanity. It was an act of genocide. Germans were tried, and they cited the California statutes in their own defense. To no avail, they were found guilty. However, Mengele's boss, Verschuer, escaped prosecution. Verschuer reestablished his connections with California eugenicists who had gone underground and renamed their crusade Human Genetics. Typically was an exchange in July 25th, 1946, when Popenoe wrote to Verschuer, "It was indeed a pleasure to hear from you again. I have been very anxious about my colleagues in Germany. I suppose sterilization has been discontinued in Germany." Popenoe offered tidbits about various American eugenics luminaries and then sent various eugenics publications in a separate package. Popenoe sent some cocoa, coffee, and other goodies. And on and on and on. Here we go. So what I'm saying is the Jew would be, and as I showed you, pointed out to you, would be the first victims of this eugenics movement. Now, what am I saying? What am I suggesting? What I'm suggesting is what Jehovah told to ancient Israelites who were steeped in sin. And it says, descendants of Cush, if the descendants of Cush can change the color of his skin, or if the leopard can change its spots, then you will also do what is right, who are accustomed to doing evil. Well, that statement, it is, if the shoe fits, you must wear it. And if it applied to ancient Israelites back in those days, then it most definitely applies to the Gentiles today. Because 2 millennia of pendulum swings and can never find the truth, but swing from one evil on this side to the other evil on that side, and back and forth and back and forth, murdering the Jews, pillaging them, stealing their children. Every Gentile race has been involved in this. The Gazans too. If the Ethiopian, the Cushi, what does this mean? The name Ethiopia itself is Greek and it means a burnt face. Well, Cush actually means black in Hebrew. So if a black man can change the color of his skin, or a leopard his spots, then you may also do what is right, who are accustomed to do evil. What I'm telling you is the Americans, being the father and the mother of modern Nazi eugenics, are not able to do what is right. And so when they start doing this, they will not get it right. They can never get it right. So what I'm telling the government, United States government, my last request before I die, of whatever, old age, whatever, is that you deport me to Israel. No, that is not a request. That is a demand. I demand you to deport me to Israel. Now, oh, you might say I'm crazy. Well, let's go to Isaiah or Isaiah 60. And I'll show you how I demand to be deported to Israel, along with all other Jews and Zionists. Arise, verse 1, arise and shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of not the Lord, but Jehovah is risen upon you. Darkness will cover the earth, and gross darkness to people, but Jehovah shall rise upon Mount Zion, and his glory shall be seen upon Mount Zion. The Goy will come to your light. What will they be bringing? What will they be bringing? And the kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes round about, and see them collect. Collect who? Who are they collecting? Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters, Zion, shall be nursed at your side. This is how the deportation of all Jews and all Zionists must be at this day of darkness. And I've talked to you over and over and over and over again about that time of darkness. It will be the time of the Gentiles coming to the end. And we will go to Romans 11, a chapter, a verse, a set of verses that the Gentiles avoid as if it is kryptonite. We'll start here talking about the Israelites. I say, have they stumbled, that they should fall? Jehovah forbid. Okay? Verse 25, for I would not, brethren, talking to Romans, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits. The article that I just read proves that the Romans, the Gentiles, have done far more sins than mere being wise in their own conceits. That partial blindness happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles is complete. Complete, filling up, done, finished, full, complete. That's the time of the Gentiles. And when that happens, all Israel shall be saved. Anytime you talk about Israel's as opposed to the Gentiles, this is not, as you Gentiles love to say, and incorrectly say, spiritual Israel. No, these are the 12 tribes of Israel shall be saved, because it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer who will turn away unrighteousness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. What covenant? Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12. concerning the glad tidings to Zion, not gospel. They might be enemies for your sakes, but concerning the election, yes, they are the beloved elect for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's sake, or Jacobi's sake, for the gifts and the calling of Jehovah cannot be changed. All right? So, you're about to see a huge pendulum swing in the United States and in Europe concerning immigration and race. And since Jehovah, Elohim of Israel, is the master of poetic justice, you'll find out what that means shortly. But since he's a master of poetic justice, these nations who practiced this evil and wicked eugenics in the past are going to have to stare at it face to face while they are forcibly being made to carefully, gently deport all Israel and Zionists back to their land, or else.